The story begins on a terrifying night, where a private cargo plane is trapped in a massive storm, right above the Pacific Ocean. It's pitch black all around, lightning is striking the sky, and the plane has completely lost its balance. The pilot is desperately trying to make contact over the radio, but suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the aircraft. The plane starts nosediving toward the ocean. Everything inside is flying through the air, and a horrifying turbulence kicks in. Amidst this terrifying chaos, a pilot tries to secure our main character, Chuck Noland, safely into his seat. But unfortunately, right at that moment, the pilot's head slams hard against the cabin, and he is severely injured on the spot. In the very next second, that giant cargo plane crashes straight into the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and water starts flooding in rapidly. Chuck starts drowning, completely clueless about how to save his life in this deep, dark water. Just then, he gets his hands on an emergency life raft, a small inflatable bag that the pilot had handed him earlier. He uses every ounce of his strength underwater to pull the cord. But the raft's tether gets horribly tangled in a piece of the sinking plane. Chuck fights until his last breath, battling death, and somehow manages to untangle the rope and break through the surface of the water. But the scene outside is even more terrifying. A massive hurricane. Torrential rain and giant ocean waves are completely ready to swallow him whole. All night long, Chuck fights a horrific battle between life and death in that raging, unforgiving ocean, clinging only to that tiny raft. Now, many of you might be wondering who this Chuck Noland actually is, and what he's doing in the middle of this deadly storm. Well, let me tell you, Chuck isn't just an ordinary guy. He's a high-ranking executive at the FedEx courier company, a man who treats time like it's God. But basically, Chuck's life was just running non-stop, exactly like the ticking hands of a clock. He didn't even have time for his personal life. But he does have an incredibly beautiful girlfriend named Kelly, whom he loves insanely. Around Christmas time, Chuck handed Kelly a gift box, which looked exactly like it might hold an engagement ring. He promised Kelly that he would be back on New Year's Eve, and then they would open that gift box together. In return, Kelly also gave Chuck a very old, family heirloom pocket watch, which had a sweet picture of her tucked inside. That very night, Chuck had to leave for Malaysia for an urgent FedEx assignment, but who knew his destiny would drag him right into the middle of this unknown ocean. The next morning, when Chuck opens his eyes, the terrifying storm from the previous night has completely calmed down. He finds himself on the shore of an unknown, deserted, and uninhabited island where there's absolutely no one in sight for miles. The moment he regains his senses, the very first thing Chuck does is frantically check his pockets and pull out that old pocket watch Kelly gave him. The watch is completely flooded with seawater and has stopped working. But the picture of Kelly inside is still perfectly safe. Chuck takes a deep sigh of relief looking at that photo, and then notices that several FedEx packages have also washed ashore with the waves. He gathers all those packages, one by one, and then starts wandering all over the island, hoping to find some help. He screams at the top of his lungs, calling out, hoping that if there's any human around, they might hear his voice. But for miles and miles, there is absolutely no trace of another human being on that island except Chuck. He is completely cut off from the rest of the world. He soon realizes that no one is coming to save him anytime soon. He writes a massive "help" in English on the beach sand, hoping that if a plane flies overhead, they might spot it and come to his rescue. Caught between exhaustion and despair, Chuck stares at his broken watch, and just like that, his first heavy day on that unknown island comes to an end. The next morning when he wakes up, he sees that the ocean waves have completely washed away the "help" he wrote on the sand. Chuck doesn't give up. He brings huge branches and wooden logs from the jungle and builds a massive help sign again so the water can't ruin it. By now, Chuck starts feeling extremely thirsty. But the salty ocean water is absolutely impossible to drink. He spots several coconut trees on the island, and while he manages to gather some green coconuts, cracking them open becomes his biggest challenge. For a regular guy with no tools, breaking open a tough coconut was like trying to chew iron. He smashes the coconut against rocks, tries multiple different ways, but the coconut just won't crack. Finally, after a lot of hard work, he manages to pierce a hole in the coconut using a sharp rock, drinking the water and saving his own life. After drinking the water, a little bit of energy returns to his body, and he discovers a cave to shelter in while exploring the island. After that, he climbs to the highest peak of the island's mountain and looks around in every direction. But from up there, all he can see is the endless, deep blue ocean. No hope, no boats, and absolutely no people. Suddenly, his eyes catch something floating in the ocean water. He immediately climbs down the mountain and rushes toward it. But as he gets closer, what he sees completely blows his mind. It was the dead body of the same pilot, who had tried to save his life by securing him in his seat during the plane crash. Seeing this horrifying sight, Chuck goes into deep shock and is completely heartbroken. With full respect, he buries the pilot's body on the shore and makes a grave for him, writing his name on a rock. Before burying him, Chuck takes the shoes off the pilot's feet because walking barefoot on the rocky terrain was badly injuring his own feet. Besides that, he also finds a small flashlight on the pilot, which was his only hope for light in that dark place. After burying the pilot, Chuck starts feeling incredibly lonely and helpless, realizing that he is truly, absolutely alone on this desolate island. Days were passing by, and Chuck was slowly starting to understand the tricks of survival. He had learned how to collect the morning dew from leaves and rainwater into empty coconut shells during the night. The drinking water situation was sorted, but for food, there was absolutely nothing on that island except coconuts, crabs, and fish. Chuck sharpens a wooden stick into a spear by rubbing it against rocks and heads down to the shore to try and catch some fish. But he ends up badly cutting his feet against the sharp corals and rocks underwater, and he starts bleeding heavily. Writhing in pain, he rips his pants in half and wraps the fabric around his feet to protect them, finally putting those pilot's shoes to use. One night, Chuck spots the lights of a large ship way out in the distant ocean. He goes crazy with joy, screaming at the top of his lungs and desperately flashing his flashlight to signal them. But that ship was so far away that neither his voice nor the faint beam of that tiny flashlight could ever reach it. Refusing to give up, the very next morning, Chuck grabs his torn life raft and sets out to cross those monstrous ocean waves to reach the ship. But the waves near the shore are so massive and powerful that they lift Chuck and his raft high up and slam them right back onto the razor-sharp coral reef. In this terrifying accident, Chuck gets a very deep gash on his leg and screams out in sheer agony. Defeated and heartbroken, Chuck drags himself back to the shore, and just then, a brutal storm with heavy rain rolls in. Limping in pain, Chuck hides inside his cave, drinks some rainwater, turns on his flashlight, and falls asleep. The next morning when he opens his eyes, he realizes that the battery in his flashlight has died forever. Now Chuck has no source of light left, nor any way to fill his starving stomach. Driven mad by hunger, Chuck finally decides to open those FedEx packages that washed ashore, the ones he had been keeping safe all this time. Hoping to find something useful, he starts ripping open the packages one by one. In one package, he finds a woman's dress. In another, a pair of ice skates. And in the third package, he finds a volleyball. Chuck uses his brain and knocks the sharp metal blades off the bottom of the ice skates, using them like knives and axes. With the help of that blade, he easily chops open coconuts and crafts a perfect, deadly spear for catching fish. On top of that, he uses the fabric from the woman's dress as a makeshift fishing net. This time, his survival tools actually work, and he successfully catches fish and crabs, but eating raw fish is just physically impossible for him. Now Chuck has to start a fire at any cost, or he is literally going to starve to death like an early caveman. He places one dry stick over another piece of wood and starts rubbing them together as fast as he can. He sweats for hours, but the fire just won't start. Instead, all that furious rubbing severely blisters and tears the skin right off the palm of his hand. His hand starts bleeding profusely, and Chuck goes completely insane with pain, frustration, and absolute rage. He kicks everything around him, screams at the top of his lungs, and with that same blood-soaked hand, he picks up the volleyball and hurls it far away. After a little while, when his anger finally cools down, he walks over and picks that volleyball back up. He notices that his bloody handprint has formed a very strange, almost face-like shape on the ball. Chuck uses his finger to draw eyes, a nose, and a smiling mouth right into that bloody handprint. The brand name printed on the back of the ball is Wilson, so Chuck officially names the ball Wilson. Since Chuck is entirely alone on this island, and the crushing isolation is starting to mess with his mental health, he starts treating the ball like a living human being and talks to it. After that, he gets right back to trying to start a fire. And finally, the friction from the wood creates a tiny, glowing ember. Chuck gently blows on it to feed it air, and eventually a massive fire erupts, making Chuck go absolutely crazy with joy. He starts dancing around the flames like a little kid, shouting at the top of his lungs and celebrating his victory right in front of Wilson. For the first time, he roasts crabs and fish over the fire, eating a full meal, and all the while, he keeps chatting non-stop with his new best friend, Wilson. But right in the middle of all this, the toothache that Chuck had ignored back in America turns into an absolute nightmare. The pain becomes so unbearable that Chuck feels like his soul is going to leave his body, and he remembers how much Kelly had pushed him to visit the dentist. Seeing no other way out, Chuck places the tip of the ice skate blade right against his rotting tooth. He grabs a heavy rock and smashes it down hard, brutally knocking his own tooth right out of his jaw. The sheer, spine-chilling agony of doing this causes Chuck to instantly pass out and collapse right there on the ground. From here, the movie's story jumps straight forward 4 entire years, and Chuck is still trapped on that exact same island. His entire appearance has completely changed. His hair and beard have grown incredibly long, and his body has shrunk down to nothing but skin and bones. He is no longer the Chuck he used to be. He has become an absolute expert at this wild, primitive life, able to throw a spear from a distance with deadly accuracy to hunt a fish. Over these 4 years, Wilson is the one who has cured Chuck's loneliness. Wilson is no longer just a volleyball, but Chuck's closest and only friend in the world. He is the one with whom Chuck shares every single feeling in his heart, every sorrow, every disappointment, and every single moment of his life. One day, while Chuck is sitting on the shore eating a fish, he spots a huge, fiberglass-like object that has washed up from the ocean. It turns out to be half of a portable toilet or a door, and seeing this, a brilliant idea instantly sparks in Chuck's mind. He fully understands by now that the biggest hurdle to escaping this island is the massive crashing waves near the shore that violently push any boat right back. Chuck figures that if he uses this fiberglass door as a sail on his raft, the wind pressure could help the boat slice right through those monstrous waves and get him out. Chuck goes back to his cave, draws up a calendar, and calculates the exact direction of the wind with extreme precision. He figures out that in the month of April, the wind will be blowing steadily out toward the ocean, which will perfectly help push his boat past the surf. So, for the next 2 or 3 months, he works like an absolute maniac to build a massive, incredibly sturdy wooden raft. He strips the bark from jungle trees to weave heavy-duty ropes, and when he runs out of rope, he uses the video cassette tape from one of the packages to tie the wooden logs together. During this time, Chuck tells Wilson that over these 4 years, he got so incredibly depressed several times that he even tried to commit suicide by hanging himself. But he just couldn't do it because the deep hope of seeing his girlfriend Kelly again was still alive inside him, and that hope refused to let him die. Finally, the month of April arrives, the harsh winds start blowing, and it's time to execute Chuck's master plan. Chuck loads his raft with plenty of coconut water for drinking, raw fish, his lovely best friend Wilson, and that one single FedEx package with the angel wings printed on it. Chuck hadn't opened that specific package in all these 4 years, because he saw it as his ultimate purpose to stay alive and return home. Chuck pushes the boat into the ocean, props up that plastic door like a sail, and uses the wind to violently clash against those terrifying waves. The waves try their absolute hardest to flip the boat over, but his genius plan actually works, and he slices right through the surf, making it out into the open ocean. When he turns around and looks back at the island, where he spent 4 years of his life like a prisoner, he gets incredibly emotional. But his troubles are far from over once he hits the open sea. For days, he drifts aimlessly on that raft with absolutely no sense of direction. He faces scorching heat, brutal rain, and deadly storms, somehow keeping himself alive by drinking rainwater and catching whatever fish he can. One night, a horrifying storm hits the ocean, and Chuck ties himself securely to the boat so he doesn't get thrown into the water. But the storm is so incredibly vicious that a huge chunk of the boat breaks off, and Chuck passes out from pure exhaustion and weakness. When the storm finally calms down and Chuck regains consciousness, he looks around and realizes his absolute best friend, Wilson, is not on the boat. Wilson has fallen into the water and drifted far away, and Chuck frantically dives right into the ocean to save him. He holds onto the boat's rope with one hand and desperately reaches out for Wilson with the other. But the ocean waves keep carrying Wilson further and further away. The rope to the boat starts slipping from Chuck's grip, so to save his own life, he is forced to make the heartbreaking decision to let Wilson go. Seeing Wilson drift away into the endless ocean, Chuck breaks down and starts crying uncontrollably, screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'm sorry, Wilson! I'm sorry!" This scene is so deeply emotional and absolutely heartbreaking that it will bring tears to anyone's eyes who watches it. After losing his one and only friend, Chuck is completely shattered from the inside. He gives up all hope of living and just lays down limply on the broken raft, waiting to die. Several more days pass by, and Chuck's condition gets so terrible that he can't even move an inch, when suddenly a heavy spray of water hits him from above. A massive whale swims right past him, and when Chuck forces his eyes open and looks behind him, he sees a gigantic cargo ship passing right by his raft. The crew on the ship spots Chuck and rescues him, and just like that, after 4 long years, Chuck is finally freed from that living hell and returns to his world. And this is exactly where it proves that no matter how massive the storms in a person's life might be, if they have the sheer will to live, they can survive absolutely anything. And with this beautiful message, this timeless masterpiece of a movie comes to an end.